Welcome, one and all, to the February 24th edition of Signals from Mars. I'm your host, Victor, and we have the biggest turnout ever for our 1984 special tonight. We have new faces, we have old faces. We are all spread out all around the world. We have Anthony Mackie in Ireland. We have Johan in Sweden. We have Jeremy in the UK. We have Mike in New Jersey. We have Ed Ferguson in Kentucky. Metal Dan in California. And Tony in Barcelona. We have Steve in New Jersey, and we have Brad in Utah joining us tonight. This is a special episode because we got a whole lot of patrons to vote as well. We got a lot to show up, and outside of 3 people, everyone voted. So that to me is very positive. Overall, 46 albums were voted on, and I got to tell you, it was a very interesting afternoon because I reached out to everyone who hadn't voted and said, hey, we got a few ties here. Do you mind voting? I know you didn't vote yet, but it would be interesting if you could lend us your votes. And there have been some spots that have shifted all over the place. Number 2 was solid all week, and not so much at the end of the day today. So it'll be interesting. What do you guys think will be number 1? Any guesses?
I'm feeling going to go out on a limb and say Iron Maiden.
You think it's going to be Iron Maiden? Okay. Well, we'll see. Maybe it'll be. Let's see. We lost 2 people. We lose. All right. You getting feedback on me, Jeremy? Shit, this happened the last time.
It's better now. I just reloaded, and you sound better now.
Okay. All right. I'm recording on my end. I'm hoping that. Let's see.
You sound absolutely fine now.
Yeah. Good now.
We have Sean in the chat as well. Sean, can you hear me okay? Are you hearing me distorted? Hope it's not like a few weeks ago where it was completely distorted and then it came out that way in the end in the video. So, but anyway, so 46 albums were okay. Sean is saying it sorted itself. Okay, cool. 46 albums were voted on. So I'm going to go real quick here from 46 all the way down to 16. And then we'll talk about the top 15. If anyone wants to stop me along the way because an album that they feel shouldn't be outside of the top 16, which may happen. I'm not going to say whose screen I'm looking at the moment as I'm saying that, but and all you guys know, 1984 was a very hard year to pick. There's a lot of good music, and it's funny because I was looking at this and I was thinking this was harder than 83, and I think a lot of people point to 83 as being a much bigger year, but I would argue that this is even a better year than 83. So anyway, so here we go. 46, Q5, Steal the Light. 45, Spinal Tap. This is Spinal Tap. 44, Slayer, Haunting the Chapel. 43, Kick-Axe with Vices. 42, HSAS with Through the Fire. 41, Anthrax, Fistful of Metal. 40, Metal Church, Metal Church. 39, In Excess, The Swing. 38, Helix, Walking the Razor's Edge. 37, Warlock, Burning Witches, 36, Manowar, Hail to England. 35, Yngwie Malmsteen's Rising Force. 34, Stevie Ray Vaughan. Couldn't Stand the Weather. 33, Sammy Hagar, VOA. 32, Motorhead, No Remorse. 31, Weird Al, In 3D. 30, Queen with The Works. 29, Triumph with Thunder 7, excuse me. 28, Crocus with The Blitz. 27, Europe with Wings of Tomorrow. 26, The Cult, Dreamtime. 25, The Cars, Heartbreak City. 24, Saxon, Crusader. 23, Steve Vai, Flexible. 22, Billy Squier, Signs of Life. 21, YNT and Rockweed Trust. There's somebody in the chat chiming in on Facebook saying, "What's up, brother?" We can't see who you are. It just says Facebook user. If it's Bill Elam or Rob Rowe or someone like that, let us know who you are. All good so far? Any questions from anyone? Any rebuttals with albums that you guys feel should have been up higher?
For me, the Triumph Thunder 7, it's like a real personal album for me. I bought it brand new, lived with it in my car for years. It's like a desert island album for me, so it hurts my metal soul to see that low on the list. But I get it. It's not everybody's cup of tea. It's a little off the cuff for them. It's not their hardest rocking album. But I think that album, to me personally, is an absolute masterpiece.
Okay. Johan, go ahead.
Yeah, Manowar, Hail to England. I know Manowar is a band that you can laugh about a lot, but that album, Hail to England, is a fantastic album. And I know this is a hard year to, it's all tense. Every album is almost perfect, but yeah, Manowar, Hail to England. I love that album. Real good one.
I think with the Manowar album, probably the biggest thing there is that they were never big in the U.S. and probably not until like Fighting the World, you really didn't start to see them like on MTV or on the radio or stuff like that. So
okay,
the first two albums were really hard to find, and they weren't readily available until I forget which came first, if it was Kings of Metal or Fighting the World, but whichever was the second album was when you started to see those first two albums being sold in stores. So,
okay.
Jeremy, anything on your end?
Yeah, probably the Europe album. I really like that. I think it was, it was a great album before they released the big one. And quite a few songs on that album which they still play live today, so it shows that it stood the test of time. Probably wasn't as well produced, and the vocals sound a little bit more amateurish, I think, on that particular album, but it's still a really good album. It's worth listening to again, I think.
Jeremy, surprisingly enough, that falls under the same category as those Manowar albums. The first two Europe albums were not available in the States until the Final Countdown came out, blew up, and then those albums were released in the U.S. So I'm sure that probably has a lot to do with it. Ed, anything in your mind?
Yeah, I would like to see Metal Church up higher, but that's a record that they released in 84 and then again in 85. And I think a lot of people didn't catch on to them until 85. I know I didn't until 86. Mm-hmm. The one standout on that list, I have to talk about Slayer if I can. Mm-hmm. I would have put Haunting the Chapel on my list if it wasn't an EP.
Right.
Solely because Chemical Warfare is on that record, which is one of the ultimate thrash metal songs of all time. That was, they really laid a blueprint for thrash metal with that song, and it never gets old. They only topped that with Angel of Death on Rain and Blood, or maybe that whole album, if you ask me. But still, what an amazing year, even for the beginnings of thrash metal.
Right.
Even though I don't think I didn't hear that record until '86 either, but got to acknowledge it.
Okay. Dan, go ahead. Can't hear you, Dan. Still nothing. See, you don't have. Check
I was
this.
on mute.
All right, there you go.
I was working at a record store at the time, and we sold copy after copy of Haunting the Chapel by Slayer. And I was young, and I really didn't know who this band was. I just looked at the album cover and pass it on and sell it. But damn, we were boxes and boxes of that. So Jeremy's right.
Okay. Anything on your end that you're surprised that is outside of the top 20? Dan?
No, there's a lot to choose from. So it is what it is.
Yeah. Okay. Anthony?
No. The only surprise, well, I'm surprised on Brad's behalf because I know he likes Crusaders a lot. Apart from that, no.
Wait, are you sure?
Brad, anything outside of Saxon that you're surprised is outside of top 20?
Well, no, that's it. Yeah, Anthony's got me pegged. So well done, Anthony. Yeah, Saxon should be higher.
Okay. And Tony, what about you?
Well, two of my lower votes, Alex and Q5, are two of the three of the lower votes of everybody. So maybe it's something personal for me, not for everyone. The two of these bands.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
It's cutting in and out a little.
Maybe it's because I have a new equipment. I have to buy a new laptop and new microphone, and maybe it's not the right choice.
We could hear you fine before. I don't know. Maybe it could be a bunch of different things. But anyway, you mentioned the two of your albums that you picked were outside of there. I didn't hear which two that you mentioned.
Alex and Q5.
Okay, the Q5. Okay. All right.
Helix.
And Helix. Okay. Gotcha now. The Helix is another one that Canadian band that I know, for example, Mark used to talk about them all the time. And I only remember hearing one song of theirs on the radio, but I talked to a lot of people that knew about them way before I did. So
yeah, they're actually pretty darn good band. I mean, consistently over the years, and I've been playing a lot more of them. But I didn't really get into them till this last couple of years. So late to the party.
But that's also because you've seen them at M3, I'm assuming.
I have not. I've never seen them anywhere. I wish they would play at M3, but M3's they're kind of rough on Canadian bands. I don't know why.
I got to see Helix on the Monsters cruise with the guy with the big hair. I don't know his name. He was one of the original guitar players from those videos back in the day. He had a rough outage on the cruise, and he was pissed off about something that had happened with the band. And I met him on his way out when we got to port. He was having a bad day, and he was sitting there, but he was very nice to me. And I could tell that he was leaving now. He wanted no further thing with Helix, and he never returned to the band after that because the band played the cruise the next year, and he was gone. He's the famous guy in all those videos. He's very iconic looking. It was just kind of humorous that I kind of politely walked up and said, "Hey, can I get your? I think you're cool." And he kind of grumbled something about something going on with the band I didn't want to get into. I said, "Thank you very much. Bye-bye."
Getting out of there before getting hit by any friendly fire. All right, so real quick, let me just do 20 through 16 here. So 20, we have Whitesnake Slide It In, Kiss with Animalize, Great White with Great White, Bon Jovi with Bon Jovi at 17, and Rush with Grace Under Pressure at 16. Johan, thoughts?
Victor, your voice is very fast.
My voice is very fast all of a sudden.
It's
Yeah.
true. You're kind of it's got that clicking and speeding up of your voice. I'm gonna blame Anthony.
Yeah.
So
He's back.
my voice sounds weird. It seriously sounds like it's
Yeah,
speeding
it's
up.
seriously sped
Yeah.
up. and flipping. It's the weirdest thing. It's like you drink 10 cups of coffee.
You're on a
Before we
helium
start.
balloon.
And you-
It's like listening to a podcast on 3 times.
yeah, that's what it sounds like.
You're bored with us already. Hurry through this.
No.
It's good now,
You're
Victor.
back.
Not at all.
Well,
You're back
you
again.
might- You might want to mention one of those last bands there again for Johan.
Well,
Okay, let me read that again. So Whitesnake Slide It In at 20, Kiss Animalize at 19, 18 is Great White, 17 is Bon Jovi, and 16 is Rush, Grace Under Pressure.
mhm. Okay.
Here we
Why?
go.
Haven't well, haven't I told you guys about Rush? Can't you see? Yeah. Okay. So I know it's Grace Under Pressure. Perhaps it's a hard record to love. It's a very 80s record, but I mean, to be honest, it's on my top 3. And if you had heard it and listened to it correctly, it should be on your top 3 as well. So I'm not going to say shame on you, but shame on you guys. It's yeah.
I think we need a recount, Victor. I think somebody is fixing the election here.
Believe me, no.
I'm changing mine and I'm putting Rush's on my list. So,
Thank you.
well,
Brad.
first it was already
Thank
there.
you.
Johan. It
Yep.
was already there. Top
Yep,
5.
thank you. Yes, of course. Thank you. Let's go on with the show.
Okay, so let me do 15 through 11 before we jump on into the top 10 here. So at 15, we have The Warning by Queensryche. 14, Fugazi by Marillion. 13, so now I'll say this. 13, 12, and 11 were in and out of the top 10 the entire week. So I didn't know where any of these albums were going to land because they got as high as 7 and they got as low as where they are now. So Sean is questioning why Marillion is at 14. Well, again, this comes back to popularity. Marillion was a huge band in the UK, but no one knew who they were in the US. So Sean and Anthony obviously voted for them, but nobody else did. That's the reason why they end up there. And these albums, 13 and up, got voted by out of 17 people, got voted by 14 of those 17. Almost every single list had the majority of these albums. So that's why they're ranked higher. So at 13, we have March of the Saint by Armored Saint. At 12, we have Condition Critical by Quiet Riot. And 11, Perfect Strangers by Deep Purple. So, again, all these albums are great. But when we take into consideration what's above them, I think that's kind of the... Sean's making the Johan complaint with Marillion. Okay. But when we factor in what's above these albums, I think that kind of eases the pain, I would think. But anyway, here's where we flip to the covers of the albums. At number 10, I'm surprised this got voted on by so many people, but it's got a lot of great quintessential stuff on there. Oh boy. The voice is going out of whack again.
Back now.
Okay. I'm recording on my end, so everything should be fine for the audio at least. The thing that sucks is that when people watch the watch a video, it's going to be wacky. But anyway, so at 10, self-titled debut by, and this band has just decided to bring one of the most controversial, most famous songs off of this back. Also had an EP, if I'm not mistaken, named after that song, but it is Wasp with Wasp. Anyone want to mention something about this album?
Yeah, sure. It's one of the biggest albums for metal here in Sweden in the mid 80s. I think it's 10 out of 10 album, as well as all the albums are. Not a bad song. So it's just a matter of taste here.
Okay. Anyone else want to mention something?
I didn't have bandwidth for it in my top 10, but I, at the same time, can feel like it deserves it. So I'm comfortable with it if that's what the group votes for. It is a standout album, but I put Armored Saint and Great White much higher than that.
Yeah, that.
Look at Metal Dan accepting the vote. Good job, Metal Dan.
Yeah, the Great White album is something that I honestly have played a lot.
It's a good album.
It is a very good album, and I think it's one that's really forgotten by them because they switched up their sound so much after this. But truly a really good album for that point in time. The Wasp album, the Wasp, and honestly the Armored Saint are two albums that in my neck of the woods just didn't get airplay, so I wasn't turned on to them. The next album, however, did, and it's unfortunate that someone who was with us earlier is having technical difficulties and couldn't join us for this. But at number 9, Stay Hungry by Twisted Sister. Anyone want to mention something about this album?
Well, as the New Jersey representative, I will cover for the Hokinator, Twisted Steve Hoker. Absolutely brilliant album. So much, it put kind of the fun in metal at that point. Little bit of comedy there, along with some good positive messages, and just an amazing overall band. To my ears at age 14, when I first heard it, it was just spectacular. And the album cover freaked out the parents, so it was an A+ effort all the way.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah, for my youth, that Twisted Sister album, I have a little bit higher. I can accept it at 9 so far. It was Twisted Sister and Y&T on these two albums of '84 was my true first concert experience. I think I was 16 or 15 or something like that. And iconic. It was something for my youth at the time. And, I knew about Twisted Sister before with Dee, but I'd never seen them live, of course. So my first experience is Dee riling up that crowd at Irvine Meadows in California. And that's what I have to say about that.
Okay. Johan, go ahead.
Yeah, Twisted Sister were the absolute most popular band in Sweden, 1985, I would say. They have 2 videos on our only 2 network channels. I want to rock, and we're not going to take it. And they were the absolute biggest metal band here back then.
Okay. Ed, did you want to say something?
Well, Mike mentioned freaking your parents out. Of course, I told you how freaked out my parents already were by rock music, and I didn't help the situation because for some reason I wrote down the lyrics to Captain Howdy, in my notebook, and
Right.
put those in my drawer. And when I was 15, my mom decided to do some extra spring cleaning and found everything I'm not supposed to have in the room, and found those lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
And every time I hear that song, of course, I didn't put the end of the song where the guy gets his due, but the creepy Captain Howdy guy I wrote down and put in my drawer for my mom to find. They didn't know what to think of me after reading that.
Did you explain that it was influenced by Stephen King?
I don't know how I explained that. They were probably more concerned about other things they found in my room, like the bottle of whiskey under my waterbed mattress, and magazines that I shouldn't have and such, all the goodies of a teenage boy.
Right.
Are your parents still worried about you a little bit, Ed?
Everybody is. Yeah, everyone is. That's right.
Cool.
I seem to give them a good reason to, without even trying.
Cool. So as much as I mentioned that some of the albums ended up outside of the top 10, this album was in and out, which kind of surprised me because I think it was such a landmark album at the time. But again, so many things above it. I kind of understand why. But number 8, Love at First Sting by Scorpions.
Yeah.
Huge album.
Yeah.
Who wants to comment on this one?
I'll take it.
All right, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, I feel like this was the peak of the Scorpions, at least on this side of the whatever. In fact, I feel like a lot of these bands, metal was really, really ruling the world at this time. And but this album, this is what put Scorpions into headlining status, made them known to everybody. Everybody knew Rock You Like a Hurricane. It was their biggest album. I don't know that any of their albums have been bigger.
Yeah, I don't think anything tops this as far as sales.
Yeah.
And I mean, you look at the album, you look at the singles that came off of it, from Rock You Like a Hurricane to Still Loving You to Big City Nights to Bad Boys Running Wild. And then if you add on some of the other album tracks, I mean, this album is solid top to bottom.
I wonder if we have Scorpions to blame for the whole power ballad thing, because Still Loving You, I don't know if that's the first one, but it was huge, and it seemed like after that everybody had to have one. So every bad boy has a soft side. Speaking of Bad Boys, when I got that, of course, vinyl back in the day, when you drop the needle and it goes into Bad Boys Running Wild, that opening riff is just that's iconic to me. I mean, it's just so good. Like that something big's happening when that thing
right.
appears. So yeah, great album. Love that album. Top 3 for me.
Anyone else want to mention anything about this album? Yeah, go ahead, Antonio.
Scorpions being European was one of the few bands that in the game were minimal accepted. Everything else is very far away, very strange. But the Scorpions being European, and maybe, as Brett says, the power ballads have more people into this songs and realize maybe it's not everything the same, and the mass people can accept this kind of bands, this kind of music. Scorpions were big in Spain in late mid-80s.
Yeah. Yeah. When Brad was talking about the beginning of Bad Boys Running Wild, I mean, there was a time period there where, as Antonio is saying, when I would vacation here in Spain, you wouldn't tend to hear a lot of hard rock or metal in regular bars. You wouldn't, rock bars, but you would tend to hear Still Loving You. You would hear Bad Boys Running Wild, Big City Nights, stuff like that in regular bars. So as he's saying, they made a lot of this music acceptable for a lot of people, and it was amazing that a band that wasn't out of the UK or the US was able to do that. So yeah, they were huge, and I mean, I think if you really look at it, Maiden, Priest, and Scorpions at this point in time were pretty much at the same level worldwide, I think. So I mean, it speaks to how big this album actually was, because this is the album that put them there. So all right, moving on to number 7. I would say that this is a shock, but this is an album that I have played the ever living shit out of throughout my entire lifetime. I remember we had an option. Well, before we would come over on vacation, my parents would give us money to buy a tape to bring over. And although it wasn't this album that I bought, the album that came out after this made me go back and realize that this was the superior of the two albums. But here we go. Dokken, Tooth and Nail at number 7. I love this album, and I'm surprised that so many other people love this album to get it up to 7, because Dokken wasn't as big as Scorpions. They weren't as big as Twisted Sister. They weren't as big as Deep Purple, Quiet Riot. But is this the effect of maybe afterwards going back and listening to these albums now, realizing how good this album is? Or is it that for you guys that voted for this, was it just that good of an album that you guys have always felt it was good? I mean, the guitar playing is awesome on this. I think the songwriting is among the best that Dokken is ever released. So, I mean, it makes sense that this will probably be the highest charting album out of any of these lists that we will do. Anyone want to mention anything about Tooth and Nail by Dokken? Go ahead, Ed.
In 1984, everything was still pretty heavy.
Mm-hmm.
So when this album came out, my friends and I like this one just as much as everything else we listened to. This is probably the heaviest Dokken record, if you ask me. And of course, videos like Alone Again played repeatedly. There's another kind of ballady start for that year. Yeah. This is a classic record. Yeah, it deserves to be on the list.
I think this is the album that really put George Lynch on the map. I mean, if you take away anything else that he's recorded, just the solo for the title track, I mean, is just one of those things that, in my opinion, could rival something that Vivian Campbell or Randy Rhoads did at that point in time. It's up there as one of the most quintessential solos of that time period.
And the title track, Tooth and Nail, that's almost as heavy as a thrash metal song back then. It's got some thrashy riffs in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Too bad they had to poof out their hair the next year in '85 on Under Lock and Key.
Yeah, well,
at least they get a cool album cover on this one, and then in '85 they had to show us pictures of their pretty selves.
Well, that was the label. The band actually hated that cover, and that the whole story behind that is that the label paid I don't know how much money for those outfits. They did the photo shoot and they threw them all in the garbage. And the label got pissed off at them because they'd spent like thousands of dollars on that, and they were like, "Yeah, we don't. We're more of a jeans and t-shirt band." And that's actually they were managed by the same people that managed Metallica, and their management was trying to get them to go more in that like street type of a look, more so than a glam look. And it was all Elektra's doing.
They were giving Stryper a run for their look on that album, Under Lock and Key.
Yeah.
All that yellow.
Anyone else want to say something about Tooth and Nail?
No, it's a great album. First album I got of theirs. Like Metal Dan, I saw Twisted Sister with Y&T. Talk about outfits. Hey Dan, how about those outfits Y&T were wearing on that tour?
Yeah, and they had the new mascot with the robot guy for the first time.
Yeah.
And the video of the short shorts that they regret wearing.
Oh yeah. But they had all these. Dave Meniketti was wearing this big hot pink jumpsuit kind of thing on that tour. But anyway, the opening band here, I don't know if it was the same where you saw him, Dan, but it was Dokken. And so that was obviously the first time I'd ever seen Dokken. And yeah, they hit the stage with Tooth and Nail and just blew the place up. For an opening band, it was incredible. Every song they played was great. And they were really, really good. And Don Dokken at that point, in fact, during the 80s, I think he was the best hard rock singer. His tone, his range, he had just an incredible scream. At that point, he was the king. So,
yeah, it was Dio and Dokken speaking to Brad at in San Bernardino on that tour, and Dokken I had as number 11. Just didn't make my top 10, but back in the day, I used to listen to it all the time.
Yeah, this is one for me that I still listen to from time to time. So, again, happy it ended up at 7.
Yeah, it's one that I will never be like, oh, I don't want to listen to this. Anytime any of that stuff comes on, I'm all in. It I haven't got bored of it yet.
Cool. All right, number 6, and I will say that the biggest song off of this album was the track that most people submitted when they submitted the track for an album. So it just goes to show the popularity and what MTV can do for you all these years later. It is Out of the Cellar by Rat.
Excellent.
Anyone want to mention anything about Rat? Go ahead, Dan.
So I do. So I created a list for myself, and maybe this is another topic for another day, but I created albums that come to my head that I think is a perfect album. And Rat Out of the Cellar is a perfect album. When I say that, that means there's no duds on the album. Every song is listenable over and over. It's perfect all the way through. So Rat Out of the Cellar is number 3 on my list, and definitely one I still listen to today.
Okay.
He's absolutely
Ed,
right.
you were going to say something?
Yeah, he's absolutely
Okay.
right. Yeah, this one is at the very top of my favorite, classic pop metal records. And yeah, Round and Round we've heard a million times, but man, that song is still great. And Warren DeMartini, he's probably my favorite guitarist from when I'm comparing him to George Lynch. Both of those guys were super hot players back then, but Warren DeMartini was always my favorite. And yeah, like Dan said, there's not a bad song on this record. It was a perfect follow-up to that EP that they released in '83, I guess. And yeah, the guitar playing on this record is great. The songwriting is, dark and heavy, but yet fun too. It was a perfect record for 1984.
Yeah, a shame that they can't get their shit together. More than anything else is that their catalog, the entire thing, isn't available on streaming services. There's a lot of stuff that is missing, or stuff that where you don't have complete albums. The EP is nowhere to be found. Some of the bigger songs off of the EP are nowhere to be found, and that to me is a big shame. And that's just because they can't get along and straighten all that stuff out. So maybe one day. Number 5. This is an album that I watched something online about the biggest singles that were released in 1985. And it was the number 2 single that year, but it's still the second most streamed song from that year as well. And it's so different to anything that the band had done before. And this, to me, Brad mentioned Scorpions possibly ushering in the power ballad. Did this band make it okay to have keyboards on your songs? Van Halen, 1984. Jump is the second most streamed song of 1984, only behind Culture Club's Karma Chameleon. So, this was a hugely popular album. For me personally, it's probably my least favorite David Lee Roth era Van Halen album, but who voted on this? Who wants to talk about this album? Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah. Let's see. I voted on this one. I really like this album a lot. And even though there's keyboards on it, there's no keyboard player per se. I mean, let's just say it's not like they added a keyboard.
That's due to Eddie's stubbornness, because later on in life, they did add a keyboard player live.
No. When?
Yeah. The last few tours with Sammy Hagar, they had a keyboard player off stage, and the only time that Eddie played keyboards on stage was for Jump.
Yeah, that's true. He stopped playing keyboards on stage. I think he was afraid letting Sammy play guitar. So anyway, that's neither here nor there. This is a really good album. I mean, it sounds good. The songs are good. It rocks. They made keyboards cool.
Yeah, for me personally, a song like "I'll Wait" used to always come on when I went to the dentist. So I mean, it had a different kind of memory for me.
When you got there, did you have to wait?
Yeah, I did. It was they always played "I'll Wait" in the Dirty Dancing soundtrack. I don't know how that worked out. It was as if it was waiting for me. So, anyone else want to speak about 1984?
Oh, well.
Go ahead, Anthony.
The production on this album is so dry and natural, and I think that's one of the reasons why it hasn't aged at all. It sounds as fresh as it did back then. You know, it's pretty raw, and I don't know, like Jump is Jump, but Jump is amazing. Like, I don't know. Have any of you guys watched any of the of Rick Beato's videos where he analyzes a song? He goes, "What makes this song great?" That's his thing.
Mm-hmm.
And he does his episode on Jump is really good, and he kind of puts words into, you know, what I've thought for ages about that song, how it's so much better than people think it is.
Yeah, for as much shit as I give them for what I just said, I mean, the song is classic for what it is. I don't think anyone can deny that. And I mean, listen, I say the same thing about Panama and Hot for Teacher, and even I'll Wait. These aren't songs that I search out because I've heard them so much over time, but you know, when I want to listen to that early Van Halen catalog and I go through all the albums, I have no issue listening to it. And hey, at the end of the day, if I have to choose between listening to 1984 or Thriller, it's 1984 all the way. So, anyone else before we move on? Anyone else want to say anything about 1984? Okay. Number 5, an album that we talked about not that long ago, or band that we talked about not that long ago, because we came up with an ultimate playlist for them after doing a special on them previous to that. But it is, what did I say? Oh, 4. Yes, number 4. Yeah, this album, number 3 and number 2 kept shuffling back and forth. And then as of yesterday, this one kind of stood pat at number 4. So number 4 is Defenders of the Faith by Judas Priest. Anyone want to mention something about Defenders?
Yeah, I'll step in there, I think, because I'm wearing the hat. Yeah, I mean, it's a great album. Judas Priest have released, many great albums during their career, and I think we'd probably agree that this is probably, it's up there with their best work because it's so solid all the way through. Some of the albums that they've released, they tail off, or there's a few the odd dud song in there that you don't want to hear, but this one really rocks in a good old 80s style, and I really enjoy it. I just think it's a great album, and I know there's others that probably agree, and it's worthy of being number 4, I think.
Okay. Anyone else want to mention something about Defenders? Go ahead, Johan.
Yeah, this were my number 1 album in hard competition, but as Jeremy said, it's a great album. No fillers, just good songs all the way through. My favorite song, as I posted to you, Victor, is the Sentinel. It varies, but right now it's a Sentinel. So
Right.
yeah, absolutely magnificent. In my opinion, their best album, but I know that someone thinks different. But yeah, Defenders, what an album!
Yeah. Anyone else? Okay. Yeah, to me, it's top 3 Judas Priest for me. Absolutely. Was my number 2 album, if I remember correctly. Just such a strong album by them. The one album that placed above it for me is just that I've listened to it so much more. But anyway, definitely deserves to be there. Number 3 was an album that was number 2 all week. And then today, with some last minute votes, barely dropped down to number 3. Number 2 and number 3 are the closest to as far as points out of the entire list. So it is Last in Line by Dio. Jeremy, I know you want.
This is just utter madness. Utter madness. What are you guys? You need to wake up and listen to it again and put it on 11, not 10, because this is one of the greatest albums of all time. It's amazing. I know we're going to talk about some great albums that are above it. I mean, it's just, what can you say about Dio? He had these 2 great albums in Rainbow, the 2 great albums in Black Sabbath, and then the 2 great albums in his own band. And to follow Holy Diver with an album that's got so many great songs on it. I mean, you could listen to any of those songs on their own and they're all fantastic, but then you get to the end of the album and you've got that Egypt, The Chains Are On, which is one of the greatest songs that any heavy metal band's ever done. Beats Iron Maiden, beats any other the band to me. The band is really rocking. It's cooking. It's playing as a heavy metal band should play. It's melodic. You can sing along to it, but you can still rock out to it. It's fantastic.
Dan, go ahead.
So I have a personal memory for Dio Last in Line. I didn't have it at number 2. I had it at 7. But the thing about it is it came out on July 2nd, 1984. And I know where I was and why, I know where I was on this date that it was released because it was really important. I was a youngster that didn't have a car. We were on a family vacation, and I had known that the record was coming out that day. And I was totally into, albums that are released and you got to get it. I had to take a break from vacation, have my mom take me to a record store where I wasn't sure where there was one, go get that cassette, run back home to where I had my portable tape player with me. And I said, I got to be alone and I'm putting this in and I have to listen to it right now. Nothing else matters to me. You guys can all vacation, but I was young. And that's what mattered for that day. And that's, I can't say where I purchased every album in my life, but I know where Dio Last in Line is. For some reason, it made that impression.
Wow. That's awesome. That's an awesome story. That makes doing these shows with you guys worth it, hearing those kinds of stories. So I appreciate you sharing that with us, Dan. Anyone else want to mention something about Last in Line?
Mike, where did you see them?
So I got the pleasure of seeing that tour with Twisted Sister opening up at Red Hot. They had lasers shooting down on the stage from up on the rocks. Dio comes out with the sword and he's shooting lasers all over the audience. It was just so absolutely epic. Every band member was like the perfect band member for that time, that place in Dio's career. A voice from God, like the guys. How a voice that big came out of a man that small has just always been utterly amazing to me. I wore out my first cassette copy that I bought in my car, bought it again, bought it on CD, had it on vinyl. So yeah, I mean, this one, has a very, very special place in my life. I think I had this one at number 3, so it's right up there for me.
Cool. Anyone else? I'll share a real quick story. Kind of touches on this. So I get a message yesterday, and the message is from somebody it says the name says Jimmy Rock and Roll or Jimmy R&R, and I'm thinking, who the hell's this? And it's my mailman. And my mailman is, I don't know, mid-50s, doesn't look like he's into rock music at all. And I told him, I said, does the R&R stand for rock and roll? He says, yeah, all my friend, his name is Jamie, Jaime in Spanish. And he says, yeah, but all my friends know me as Jimmy Rock and Roll. He goes, because every good, rock musician, their name is either Jimmy or James or something like that. And he goes, like Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix. And he says, like Ronald James Padavona. And I'm like, whoa. He goes on to say James Hetfield and stuff. But what stuck with me is he knew Ronnie James Dio's real name right off the bat. And he goes, you like music, don't you? I go, you want to come in and see my vinyl collection? He goes, no, I need to finish for the day, some other day. But so we real quickly start talking about Dio. And he admitted to seeing the Dio hologram here and everything else. But it was like one of these coolest things that without knowing it, my mailman is a really big Dio fan. So yeah. Love the album. It's funny because I revisited Last in Line while doing this. And before that, I was like, I like the album. I don't love it. And then after I started listening to it, I'm like, shit, this has so much good stuff on it. Like, it's one of those things where there's so much good stuff here that you forget about some of the stuff that you like because you listen to other stuff more. But the album is, I'm not going to argue with Jeremy as to whether it should be higher or not, but I'm glad it's within the top 10 and it's within the top 3. So, number 2, an album that that Johan and Brad, the three of us talked about last week. To me, this album signaled the beginning of thrash metal. And Ed, you mentioned Haunting the Chapel before, but to me, Ride the Lightning, I mean, it starts off with Fight Fire with Fire, the title track. I mean, even Fade to Black. Fade to Black to me is something that, for as much as people talk about Ozzy guitarist and Tony Iommi being the most important, to me, the song Revelation Mother Earth was such a huge influence on thrash metal with that acoustic part going into that fast part to the end. I think that's a direct influence on Fade to Black. I mean, to me, this is what really laid the initial foundation for thrash metal. Not taking anything away from Kill 'Em All, but I do think that Kill 'Em All, for the most part, was more of a new wave of British heavy metal album where Ride the Lightning was finally their stamp. And I mean, that's without me even mentioning For Whom the Bell Tolls and Creeping Death, which get played 1 million times a day on radio all around the world in 2023. So, Ed, Ride the Lightning.
Yeah, you're making good points. They kind of showed what you could do with thrash metal, beginning with this record, being more diverse than Kill 'Em All. Of course, this was my intro to thrash metal, hearing them on the Metal Shop. And so I heard Ride the Lightning first, went to the mall the next day, bought it, and then heard Fight Fire with Fire for the first time. So that was probably the fastest song I'd ever heard. And nobody I knew liked it. I couldn't find one person that liked that.
Right.
They could handle For Whom the Bell Tolls, that kind of thing, better. But, after a while, especially with Master of Puppets, people started to come around and realize just how epically great this record is. The tone, the production is just perfect. I love this album cover. Not a song I don't like. The song Ride the Lightning, one of the greatest thrash metal songs of all time as well. These 83, 84, 85, even though thrash metal was still so underground, it's just so much awesome stuff to dig into during those years, especially because you can hear all the genres of extreme metal in all those bands. And then as the 80s went on and the 90s, then they became more subgenre. But back then, when it was all starting, you were hearing flavors of everything at once, and it was just super exciting.
Yeah, and I think they and all the bigger bands, we point to, say, Suicidal Tendencies or DRI, excuse me, or even Anthrax is doing crossover type stuff. But I do think that Metallica, I mean, just listen to Fight Fire with Fire. There's stuff there that's definitely drawn from punk rock that they're incorporating in there, which is kind of what made thrash. If you think about it, you take some punk, you take some Motorhead, you take some new wave of British heavy metal music, you fuse that all together. You fuse some of that, the acoustic stuff that Randy Rhoads was doing as intros. You look at Battery, you look at Fade to Black, you look at all these other things that they've done over the years, and maybe they don't get enough credit for crossing over some of the stuff. But I mean, I think this album is huge, definitely in retrospect. Anyone else want to mention something about Ride the Lightning? Johan?
Yeah. had it on cassette, not the original, just the taped over cassette.
Right.
It's a fantastic album. My number 2 or 3, I remember. But yeah, my favorite song back in the day were Trapped Under Ice. Not anymore, but this is a fantastic album. It's very important album back in the day. So perhaps Metallica's finest hour. Perhaps. Yeah, we have talked a lot about this album, but no, I can't say any more right now. For Whom the Bell Tolls, I mean, I've seen Metallica at least 15 times, perhaps. I mean, For Whom the Bell Tolls is still a fantastic live song. Yeah. Fantastic album. Yeah. No, I can't say anymore.
And outside of what you've mentioned about the album, one thing that you mentioned to me is a big deal. You said you can't remember if it was 2 or 3, and that's because there's so much good music here that it's hard to keep track of which album you ranked above the other one just because of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, to speak of this list, I mean, the albums I have ranked, I mean, they're all top 10 albums. I mean, I mean, they're not top 10. It's the albums I have mentioned on your list is, oh wow, it's perfect albums, all of them. So this is not there aren't any losers on this list.
Yeah. I had 13, and it was harder for me to realize what the first 10 were going to be, more so than worrying about whether they were good albums or not. So are we ready for number 1? Let's recap 10 through 2 real quickly here. At 10 we had Wasp with Wasp. At 9, Twisted Sister with Stay Hungry. 8, we had Scorpions with Love at First Sting. Dokken with Tooth and Nail at 7. Rat with Out of the Cellar at 6. Van Halen with 1984 at 5. Judas Priest with Defenders of the Faith at 4. Dio with Last in Line at 3. Sorry, I'm remembering. I think Mike made the comment when I mentioned Phil Soussan saying that they weren't doing Dio stuff, or that they were kind of getting away from the whole Dio thing. And Mike says, for God's sakes, you named the band after a Dio song. So there you go. Last in Line at number 3. At number 2, Metallica with Ride the Lightning. And at number 1, no shock to anyone, this is the highest rated album points wise out of any list that I've done with you guys. So it is Power Slave by Iron Maiden. Huge album for the band. I think Number of the Beast was probably the first big album in the States for them. But I think this was the first huge album for them in the States, because I remember MTV premiering the video for 2 Minutes to Midnight. I remember them premiering the video for Aces High. And that was unheard of for bands like this at that time. Outside of maybe Ozzy and Motley Crue and Kiss, I don't know, maybe Def Leppard. Outside of that, you didn't have bands like Iron Maiden getting a lot of press on MTV, and it was a big deal. They did a whole, back then they did the video premieres, and they played the song throughout. They played the video throughout the day. 2 Minutes to Midnight was on a considerable amount of times, and that to me was huge as a as a heavy metal fan. This album, I think, easily outside of maybe one or two maybe, was on everybody's list at one place, one spot or another. So this is a big album for pretty much everyone here. Who wants to talk about Power Slave? Raise your hand. There you go, Dan. Mike, go ahead. You were first. Power Slave. Oh, are you muted? Can't hear you.
Yeah. So yeah, going back to what Dan had said about anticipating an album coming back and having to get it the first day. September 1984, me and a bunch of my friends from high school left school middle of the day. The second the record store opened, piled into my car, drove over to the record shop, opened the box, and got our original copies of Power Slave. Sat in the car, listened to it all the way through twice before heading back to school. So that was the album for me in high school, and I played it over and over and over again. And is another one of those albums that could come up any day, and I will listen to it all the way through, no matter what.
Who else?
Yeah, I don't remember where I was when I bought that one either, or that one, but I know I had it on cassette. And what was interesting with the cassette is, you're listening to it for the first time, and the cassette had a long gatefold. Some of them were just, a couple of pages, or you flip it once and that was it. But this one was special, and it folded out to 8 pages or so. I don't know, whatever. But I just remember that. And you kept looking at it back and forth. Both sides double printed. And it's a perfect album. And the launch of the tour that really made them what they are now today, with that tour, Scream for Me Long Beach, the live After Death and all that, it pushed them to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. Who else? Who else wants to talk Power Slave?
Yeah, I will.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, this was a huge album here, really highly anticipated, and it's great that they managed to get so big on it, because it was like an album. They didn't make any compromises, and they got huge as a result.
Right.
So it's kind of a great album. They did really well. Good for them, kind of situation.
Yeah, I mean, if you really think about it, the title track, Rime of the Ancient Mariner, I mean, between them, that's 20 some odd minutes worth of music in 2 songs. And it's not what they've done in recent years. I mean, it's well thought out, and every riff and twist and turn really has a rhyme and a reason to what they were doing.
And much like what I said about Van Halen, it's got a natural production that hasn't dated at all, and it won't date, because it just sounds like a band playing.
Right.
It's beautiful.
I love listening to this album either on really good headphones or on good speakers. As a drummer, hearing Nico playing, I mean, like what you're saying, just the way that Martin Birch captured them, it sounds like you're in the room with them. I mean, those drums sound like they're in the room with you. It's unfortunate, because I think, Anthony, you've mentioned this before, what they went from with Power Slave to what they got on Somewhere in Time, where the production was just somewhere completely different, where to me it just feels so neutered. And with this album, I really think Number of the Beast, Peace of Mind, and Power Slave sonically are probably their best 3 sounding albums because of that. Let's see. Who else wants to mention something about Power Slave? Anyone else?
It's a great album, and it's unlike you guys who bought cassettes. I would buy the vinyl and put everything on a cassette because I like to edit things. But this is the first album I think I had that wouldn't fit on a C90, on one side. It was more than 45 minutes long, and so I had to cut a song out. I'm trying to remember which song that was that I cut out, but it was a tough one. It was tough to omit a song from this album because this album was that good, and. Yeah, this time in the world, and Iron Maiden, they were number one. So it was great album, great concert too. So
Cool. Anyone else? Power Slave.
Yeah, this is the first album that I remember back in the day in 84, 85. Seeing older guys in my town wearing concert T-shirts with Power Slave. So with the mummy head on the front and the Tor on the back.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember asking them, "Where did you buy those T-shirts?" I bought it in Gothenburg, where we see them. So that's when I decided I want to go to concerts. And obviously, when they were here on the Power Slave tour, they were here in Europe. Motley Crue was opening up for them, and to see that show would be absolutely amazing. And to me, it's one of those shows that I've really wanted to see. Maiden and Motley Crue 84 in Gothenburg.
Yeah,
But I wasn't there.
That's Motley Crue coming off of Shout at the Devil, right?
Yeah. But they have changed their stage outfits, so they were a little bit more, with the colors and the, more theater or paint clothes. So we were a little bit confused when we saw the pictures from the show.
Right. They drastically changed their look.
Yeah.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Big thing back then.
Yeah. Absolutely. Cool. So any surprises in the top 10 for you guys? Anything that you guys could say doesn't fit the top 10?
Well, I have to say there wasn't too many from my list in the top 10. I was surprised that, say, Scorpions was so high. I never even considered putting Scorpions in, so the top two, no surprise whatsoever. It was always going to be those two. I'm surprised that Dio was as high. I know it was very high among some people's lists, but I didn't think it would get that high amongst, everybody's.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's it. But like,
what did you have as number one, Anthony?
Good question. I know it changed at the last minute. I think it was
Dio.
Maiden.
No. Oh, okay.
No,
it was either. I can't remember.
You want me to say it?
Oh no, yeah, it was Marillion. Of course it was. Yeah.
Good for you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's the difference between where you are and where I am, where Marillion doesn't even come in at all to me. They don't exist. But yet for me, in the top albums, and I had to keep them out, is Lizzie Borden, which is Los Angeles, California, and Keel with Lay Down the Law. So, those were on my radio in my area. Marillion didn't even exist.
Oh yeah, well, we were aware of Lizzie Borden. Keel, not so much that. My introduction to Keel was The Right to Rock, so I presume that was after that.
Yeah, but I mean, to your point, then that's why I think doing these shows is so special, because we're all from different parts of the world. So especially back then, radio was so different, MTV was so different. And we've talked to Anthony about that, how that was pretty much non-existent for him. And in other parts of the world, I'm sure it was the same. Whereas, Scorpions was all over TV and radio back then for us. A lot of these bands were. So it's interesting how for some people certain things rank high. We talked about the Europe album. We talked about the Helix and Motorhead album. The Q5, which Antoni mentioned, I'd never heard of Q5 until he added it to the list, just because it was a band that we weren't familiar with. So that's something that I need to check out now. A lot of this, that's kind of what was cool about back then with radio, is that it was very regional. So a band like an Armored Saint could be big in like 3 states, and you heard about them. Whereas nowadays, everything has to be universal, or the band, quote unquote, isn't big. So, anyway, for anyone else, is there anything that surprised them? Go ahead, Johan.
Yeah, I didn't hear where Merciful Fate ended up.
No Merciful Fate anywhere on here.
Okay.
Yeah, we sold a lot of that album too in the record store, and I didn't know what was going on with Merciful Fate with that voice until much later. That album cover was iconic, with their label and their logo and all that. I didn't have room in my 10 for Merciful Fate. Go ahead.
No,
Yeah.
I didn't either, but that's an album that I'm surprised that it didn't make higher, because it's a very influential album. It's, I guess, here in Sweden, that's a huge album.
Yeah, for us on the East Coast, had no clue who Merciful Fate was.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
Anyone else before we wrap this up?
Merciful Fate got a lot more respect as time went on, I think, kind of like the Ramones did. Unfortunately, Joey and everybody isn't with us anymore. And I think he's still able to tour now with Merciful Fate because they got recognition from back in the day. And I think they got bigger as they got older. How about that?
That's a fair point. Because, and I say that they weren't big on the East Coast, and now that I'm thinking about it, I actually spoke to Charlie Benante about the album Melissa by them. Was it Melissa? Yeah, it was Melissa, and then he said, Can't Break the Oath, or what's the name of the album?
Don't Break the Oath.
Don't Break the Oath. Okay.
Don't break the oath.
He said no, that's the big one, not Melissa. And he talked about how that was influential for them, and obviously Metallica did a whole melody on Merciful Fate stuff as well. So obviously there were plenty of people that were into them at the time. In any event, I want to thank everyone who joined us tonight: Johan, Jeremy, Mike, Ed, Metal Dan, Antoni, Brad, and Anthony. Also want to thank the people that were in the chat. Sean Richmond joined us. Jose in Connecticut joined us. Again, there's a mystery Facebook user who joined us who I still don't know who that was. And also want to thank, anyone who... other people that voted that aren't present. We had Chris Sinzak of Death Week. We had Chris Vaglio of the Song Swap Showdown as well. Both of them are also patrons who voted. Want to thank them for sending in their votes. And that's pretty much it. Thank you guys. It was a blast as usual. And we got to figure out what the next patron show will be. Possibly will be a band related episode. We'll have to vote on that. And
Merciful Fate.
Merciful fate. Let's see what people vote on. We've got plenty of other big bands that we haven't talked about yet, but hey, I'll throw that up there with some more and see what people want to talk about. So on that note, thanks everyone for watching or listening to this. Again, thanks you guys for participating and being patrons. It means a lot to me. And if I could only find the video to close the show, would be great. Here we go. All right, guys. Thanks. We'll see you next time on Signals from Mars.
Thank you for watching the Signals from Mars live stream. You can watch the show live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Twitch, or check out replays on YouTube. Go to signalsfrommars.com for more information. This concludes our show.